featured guest speaker today is Margaret Doughty, an atheist who received global news coverage when, after applying for United States citizenship and objecting to the pledge to bear arms in defense of the nation, was told that she had to officially join a church that forbids violence or her application would be denied. The ensuing controversy was covered by media sources such as the Huffington Post, ABC News, and BBC. Margaret is also a prominent advocate and champion for literacy, both in the United States and worldwide. She is the founder of the Literacy Power Line and has worked to raise literacy levels in Africa, the Middle East, and the United States, developing coalitions facilitating regional literacy planning, advocating for educational system change, and raising resources. In 2000, Margaret was awarded the Order of the British Empire by HRH Queen Elizabeth II at Buckingham Palace for her contribution to the field of literacy. And most recently, Margaret was asked by the U.S. Department of Education to manage the coalition development component of the Great Cities Summit. Please welcome our guest speaker for today, Margaret Doughty.
Good afternoon. So you can tell that I'm not an American, I come from some other spot. I'm very, very pleased to be here today and very grateful for the invitation to speak with all of you. So I want to share a little bit about my background and the journey that took me to this kind of interesting situation that occurred for me earlier this year. And I grew up in a very small village in England. So imagine, tall hedgerows, primroses, fat, overfed woolly sheep, kind of blocking the little kind of country lanes, cows coming and going, ready to be milked several times a day, and you can't sort of get from A to B. Idyllic. Little church right in the middle of the village that was in the Doomsday Book. A sort of, you can see the picture. Well, as a child, this was the most boring place anybody could ever have been. And the one redeeming feature was the fact that my father had a library. And that was my escape. That was the way that I could get out and travel the world and really enjoy learning about other locations, other places, and dreaming about where I would like to be when I grew up. One of the stories that I really loved was a Sherlock Holmes story. Sherlock Holmes?
Oh, yeah.
And Dr. Watson. Yes. So Sherlock Holmes is out on the moors up in North Yorkshire, and he's sleuthing and trying to find clues because they're catching a notorious criminal who is sort of hours ahead of them out in the hillside. And it begins to get dark, and they decide that they really have to set up camp for the night, and they would pick up this search the next morning. So they set up their camp, and Sherlock Holmes says to Dr. Watson, "Dr. Watson, look up and tell me what it is that you see." And Dr. Watson looks up and he says, "Oh my goodness, this is a magnificent canvas painted by some wonderful artist. And look at all those constellations. I wonder what the story is behind each of these." And Sherlock Holmes interrupts him as he's waxing eloquent, and says, "Dr. Watson, do you observe that our tent has been stolen?" And I wanted to sort of mention that because we think that we're looking at the same thing. But every one of us is looking at that picture with a different perspective. Do you remember Coming to America? Have you seen Coming to America?
Yes.
So why did you come here? To find something special. Oh, it's a long way to travel. No journey is too great when one finds what one seeks. How many of you were born outside of the United States? Look around. It's a substantial number in the group. Prince Akeem may have been coming to America to really sort of find what he is seeking. And you remember he went to New York, and of course he was seeking his queen, and they directed him to Queens, and then the whole story sort of evolved from there. Well, I didn't come to America in quite that way. I came on a short-term contract with no intention to stay with my family, but I too was looking for something that I was really seeking. I was looking to find a way to make meaning in my life. I had that burning 60s desire to change the world, but I didn't quite know how. So when we arrived, my children, 3 sons, were very small. They grew, they're now married, happily married, and in the 80s, I felt that I was a resident alien. But by the time the 2000s came, I was calling myself a British Texan. If there had been a passport for the world, I would have applied for it long ago. And when I arrived, it was a simple process to get a green card. And my card didn't have an expiration date, so I could legally stay in the United States forever. In the 1980s, I was a visitor, but by the 2000s, I was at home. And my grandchildren live here. I have 2 wonderful, beautiful little granddaughters. The process with the green card, though, was very interesting. A new law came out that required that green cards had to be renewed every 10 years. But that didn't apply to those early green cards that were forever. However, despite the fact that I had that green card, I was harassed every time I came back into the country. The more I thought I was coming home, the less the immigration service thought I was coming home. You need to get a new green card. Don't you like living in this country? Oh, there are so many benefits and you're taking advantage of them all. You should become a citizen. We're not going to let you in. Come into the office and we'll discuss this. So it was really horrible coming into the country. So while that journey was taking place and I was thinking, what am I going to do about this situation? Let me tell you a little bit about what I was doing with the rest of my life. No journey is too great when one finds what one seeks. I found that I had a real passion to address the issues of illiteracy, not just here, but in countries worldwide. 92 million Americans have low literacy skills. And I was invited by Kathy Whitmire, so you can tell this is going back a long ways, to start a literacy coalition for Houston, the first one in the country. And at that time, I was working at HISD with their new technology department. So again, new technology, that's a long time ago as well. I was a former teacher, and so I was really sort of enjoying this work. And HISD sent me on executive loan to start this commission for the city on a 1-year contract. And I worked for the coalition for 12 years. All on executive loan from HISD. So I was in a great place. I was loving my work. We had the opportunity to make changes. And I got to work with 3 different presidents. I got to work with some of the major funders in the country. And I believe that in the hard work that we did, we made change. And Vic mentioned this event in Buckingham Palace. I was in my office at the Houston Center for Literacy, and working in the conference room with a meeting, and my secretary came in, and she was interrupting a meeting, so she whispered, "You have to come to the phone right now." And I thought, this is very, very strange. So I went to the phone, and the British Consul General was on the phone. And he said, "Margaret, you are not to speak. I am asking you one question. When I have asked it, you will hang up, and I will perhaps one day tell you what this is all about." And I'm thinking, this is very peculiar. So the question was, if you were honoured by the Queen, would you accept the honour? Well, that's a no-brainer. So I thanked him and said, yes, indeed, I would. That would be very kind. And of course, this was then the nomination for becoming a member of the British Empire. And of course, this was not very long after John Lennon had been asked. And John Lennon said no. Well, one does not say no to the Queen. So it was a wonderful experience, and my family went, and as we drove into Buckingham Palace, I mean, even now I can't say it, drove into Buckingham Palace. You know, prior to this, I'd been outside the gates looking through, right? And as the gates opened, this whole crowd of tourists rushed to the car, snapping photographs. I don't know how disappointed each one of them was when they got their photos developed and they found that they had no clue what it was. It was a wonderful experience. If anybody ever wants to know how one should curtsy, we had a lesson in curtsying, and the process for walking backwards. I can teach anybody either of those two things. So, as my stay in the United States continued, and I enjoyed my family growing up and took on new initiatives and projects, the United Nations created what's called the Decade of Literacy, and they challenged countries across the world to take on a UN initiative that could make change. So I was asked to take on the initiative here, and we created a scroll called the Right to Literacy Scroll. We framed it on the women's rights campaign from the 1880s. I need to get my dates right. And we created events in communities all around the country where discussion about literacy as a social justice issue were developed. We had a logo where we had a fist with a pencil in the fist with literacy and justice for all. And as this scroll went around the country, communities developed activities that they were going to do to change the low literacy status in their communities. Because as you know, literacy and poverty go hand in hand. So here is the scroll, and some of the activities in the different communities around the country. And although I'm an old teacher, perhaps I should say a former teacher, some of the folks who came out to help were older than I was. Two amazing ladies joined in the effort. Dr. Angelo, who was just remarkable and outspoken and wonderful about the issue. Betty White, who had rather a different approach. She put her humour into it and helped us and supported us. And then Mrs. Bush. And one of the things that is very exciting to me is that in this initiative, there were people like me who were way over here. And there were people like Mrs. Bush who were over there. We were working on an issue that everybody could embrace, and it was extremely exciting. So as we got to the end of the initiative, then Mrs. Clinton came forward and she finally signed the scroll to complete the signatures, and she sent the scroll on its way, and we went to Paris, and delivered it at the beginning of the year. So we're waiting now on all the ramifications of this and what are the next steps that are going to come up. But I wanted to share that with you because that was very much a campaign kind of in the way that this newest thing that happened was. I went out of my way to put that campaign together. This new campaign came to me without any warning and completely floored me. So in the work that I was doing, I had raised funds and helped a lot of organizations start citizenship classes. A high percentage of folks with limited literacy skills have low English as their first language skills. And so ESL and citizenship classes, particularly in Houston, are taking place all over the community, and many of you, I'm sure, may have been involved in those. And many of those students are very, very, very intimidated by the process that they have to go through to get their citizenship. And I made the decision that I would go ahead and apply for citizenship myself. I filled out the application form and took the form to my lawyer down in Palacios. And he said, "You've left out one of the questions." He said, "You have to check this box." And I said, "No, I don't." This box was, "Are you willing to bear arms for the United States?" And I said, "No, I'm totally not willing to do that. And I think that the law allows me not to do that." So he said, "This isn't going to work, but try and see." So I was called in for an interview up at the USCIS offices up near the airport. And a delightful immigration officer welcomed me and swore me in, and how pleased she was that I was going through this process. And then she saw that I hadn't checked the box. Oh my goodness. "You're an old lady. We're never going to ask you to fight. Just check the box. If you don't check the box, it's not going to go through." So I said to her that I would leave and I would come back with a revised statement. So I sent in a revised statement, and she said, "Your application has been denied. The reason that you gave as a conscientious objector is not sufficient. You have to object on religious grounds to be a conscientious objector. Moral and ethical grounds are certainly not sufficient." So I asked her, "Could you put this in writing for me?" "Oh no, we don't do that." "Could my lawyer call you and you could explain it to him and he could tell you, the reasons for this?" No, we don't talk on the phone to people. Revise your statement and come back." She also said, which I love, "My supervisor said that once I approve a statement like yours, everyone could use the same reason to object. And then there will be no one available to fight, and we can't have that." So I was putting my comments together for this meeting today, and I found this quotation from John F. Kennedy. "War will exist until that distant day when the conscientious objector enjoys the same reputation and prestige that the warrior does today." I was so pleased to find that. It was just a chance finding. So I was told, "It's your choice. Come in and share with us your religious reason for your request. Or just come in and check the box. We'll see you soon." So on my second interview, And I think it was very generous of them to give me a second interview. I mean, she was very delightful. She wanted this to work. She said, first of all, I had to swear you in, to tell the truth, nothing but the truth. She did, at this stage, omit "so help me God." But she said, what did you decide to do? So I read her my statement, and this is what I read to her. I am sure that the law would never require a 64-year-old woman like myself to bear arms. But if I am required to answer this question, I cannot lie. I must be honest. The truth is that I would not be willing to bear arms. Since my youth, I have had a firm, fixed, and sincere objection to bearing arms. I deeply and sincerely believe that it is not moral or ethical to take another person's life. And my long-term spiritual beliefs impose on me a duty of conscience not to contribute to warfare by taking up arms. My beliefs are as strong and deeply held as those who possess traditional religious beliefs and who believe in God. I want to make clear that I am willing to perform, and this is their terminology, work of national importance under civilian direction, or to perform non-combatant service in the armed forces of the United States if and when required by law to do so. Well, she looked at my statement. She said, you can still change your mind. She said, what will you do? And I said, let me be clear here. You just swore me in to tell the truth, and you're asking me to lie? Do you want new citizens of the United States to be people such as that? And she said, it'll be okay, just check the box. So, I then received another letter. They did want me to be a citizen. So this was a letter of continuance. The only way to move forward is if you are prepared to submit a letter from your congregation on church letterhead, signed by 2 elders of the church, affirming your binding religious affiliation and confirming that you are a member in good standing of the church. So then the protests began. I love Facebook. I began this conversation just with my little group of Facebook friends. Well, then word of mouth, and family, and other friends. An atheist and humanist organization. I mean, when I was working on a literacy campaign, this is what I wanted to happen. And then those wonderful folks at the American Humanist Association and the Freedom from Religion Foundation worked with their legal departments and wrote letters to the USCIS in Houston. I am so incredibly grateful for their support that they provided. And then, I mean, this is all within sort of 24 hours of it going on Facebook. The Huffington Post leaps in. And Margaret Doughty has been told she'll be denied citizenship unless she provides proof on official church stationery of her status. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm getting phone calls, my email is getting blocked. The Epignani Humanist Center, at the end of their very, very wonderful letter, I don't know anything about the details of the law in terms of what case and what, this versus that and what have you. They did that foundational work to be able to say, here is the research to prove that you are right. And so the Legal Center ended their letter with this paragraph. In order to avoid litigation, to overturn your unconstitutional actions, we ask that you immediately reverse course and inform Ms. Doughty that her naturalization application may proceed without her being required to take an oath she is permitted to forego. Please notify us immediately, in writing, of your decision on this matter. Well, then a very interesting thing happened. I began to receive letters and phone calls and emails from faith-based groups. We understand you need a church. And, you know, they were amazing. They were generous and kind. This was good folks saying, we believe you, we agree that you're right, we will support you, we will write that letter for you, we will do what you need. Some of them were interesting churches, you know, churches that apparently were in existence and maybe just had one person as the entire church and congregation. And then, of course, the last one on the list just absolutely floored me. I loved it. The Church of the Pastafarians and the Great Spaghetti God. So, it wasn't relevant that all these wonderful churches were offering to help. It was not the point. I am not religious. I don't belong to a church. I don't want to belong to a church. And I believe that the law is on my side. So, again, we're still within a few days of this coming out. And my son in Chicago called me and he said, "Mom, have you looked at Reddit? You're on the front page." People were calling me and saying, "Yeah, there's 1 million hits on this site, there's 500,000 hits on that site." All these amazing organizations. The media is so powerful. And they were so generous in their support. So many of these organizations were not only putting out information, but they were working in the background to find legal aid to help me take this as a case and really sort of fight this issue. I knew that I couldn't afford a long drawn-out law case, and so the Freedom from Religion Foundation was amazing in its really identifying people in Houston for me to talk to, identifying folks nationally for me to talk to, and people were behind the scenes beginning now to put some kind of a campaign together. The Moral Compass, I'd never heard of the Moral Compass. They came out, and one of the things that they said was the reason that her application stands a good chance of being denied is that Margaret Doughty is not religious. It appears that she is facing a First Amendment violation. As a conscientious objector to war, she is basing her position on her personal ethical code rather than a religious one. And they began to share what some of those prior cases were that had already been won in court years ago. So the lawyers in Houston, many of them coming to talk to me as a result of conversations with Mayor Parker's office. Her staff were very, very helpful. I'm lucky. I know a lot of people. If I didn't know the people that I knew, and if I wasn't a little bit bombastic, if I was intimidated by the system, I would have either given up or checked the box. So Gordon Kwan, who I respect very, very much, has very different views to the views that I hold. But he worked with me and his office to try and find the right way to do this. And in the end, the question was, all right, if we take this on, are you prepared to take it all the way to the Supreme Court? It may take 3 or 4 or 5 years or more, but are you prepared, to have your life taken over with this issue? So the answer, of course, was yes, let's do it. CNN came on board. lots of questions, lots of discussion, and the issue really was continuing to inspire more people to send letters. There was a deadline on a Friday, by which time, if I had not responded to the USCIS, they would have denied the application period and I wouldn't be allowed to continue the process. And so before that Friday deadline, on the Wednesday and on the Thursday, all of this media response was helping people rally, and people were taking letters to hand deliver them to the immigration office, and the immigration office was refusing to take any hand delivered letters. And then I got a call from the BBC. And most of the interviews that I had had to that point were telephone interviews for radio stations and Skype interviews for the TV channels. And so the BBC said, you know, can we do a Skype interview? And at the end of the interview, the interviewer laughed and he said, okay, so do you still really want to be an American citizen? Then finally, and really interestingly, there was good news. Congressman Blake Farenthold. Now, Blake is the congressman for my little rural area outside of Houston, and he's a Tea Party Republican. And he went to bat for me. It is wonderful when people know what is right, and I was so incredibly grateful to him for that. And as a result of his interventions, as well as everybody else's, but it was his intervention talking directly to USCIS and working directly with the immigration office in Houston, that they backed down. And I'm going to show you a little video when I finish speaking in a moment, about when Fox came out to my home in Palacios and what happened down there. But while they were there, I received the email from USCIS. This service hereby withdraws the request for evidence issued on June 7th and accepts your detailed statement in satisfaction of the information requested. Your application for naturalization has been approved. So again, those wonderful media folks spread that news, and that went out. And Divided Under God said, this case can be seen as a victory for the non-religious in the US, many times referred to as the nons, based on religious affiliation in questionnaire categories. Often called the fastest growing demographic in the country, those not affiliated with the religion are said to make up 20% of the population. Atheists fall into this category, are widely misunderstood, and just as in this case, are often discriminated against by the religious majority. This fight had been fought before, during Vietnam times. The Supreme Court held that a conscientious objector status under the conscription law may not only be based upon sincere, deeply held beliefs, having their origin in traditional concepts of religion, but also upon beliefs which are purely ethical or moral in their source. So, why did this happen? Think about it. You know, who stands to gain from this nonsense? Why did it happen? I want to tell you a little bit about the day that I went to the citizenship ceremony, because that was maybe one of the saddest days of my life. When I arrived, I was asked if I had gone through the process, if I was, had done everything that I needed to do. I was asked to present a letter. I was allowed to go inside in the hall. There were probably, I don't know, 3,000 people there. And I said at the registration desk, I have been approved to give an amended oath. Can you tell me what I need to do? Oh, we don't answer that question here. Go inside and ask someone. I went inside. I asked the same question. I've been approved for an amended oath. Can you tell me what I need to do? Oh, I don't know about that. Go out to the front desk. So nobody seemed to know, but I went with my family, we took our seats, and I looked at the packet that I had been given. And in my packet, there is the oath of allegiance. And the lady said, this is what you read. And so it says, I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when so required by law. And it ends, so help me God. So I didn't quite know what to do. There I was, my family are all excited and all happy and giving me silly flashing red, white and blue things and little, do you know what I mean? I mean, it's a fun thing to do. It's a celebration. It's serious, but it's something that people celebrate. And they were all sitting there, and you can see there's Gordon Kwan, ready to sort of celebrate as well. And they said, those of you who are approved for an amended oath, please come down to the floor. And I thought, oh good, they're going to deal with us first and say go home. Well, when I got down there, they said, what you do is you hold the oath form and you put up your hand and you just don't say those words when everybody else does. I couldn't believe it. So, okay. Then the judge comes in, and the judge says, everybody who's going to take their citizenship oath, please stand, raise your right hand. I will read your oath, and you will agree. So I put my hand down, because there was no amended oath. So that became really a very, very sad situation. So I really appeal to all of you. This can't go on. Those folks who provide the training for citizenship classes need to know this. When I took, I don't know if you know, before you actually get approved for the citizenship, you have to do a citizenship test. There are 100 questions. One of them was which ocean is on the west side of the United States. They were interesting questions. But one of them was, what is freedom of religion? That was one of the questions I got. I said, well, that is that you're free to choose to belong to a religion, or you are free to choose not to. And they said, correct, that is the right answer. And so there's something so wrong here. We need to ask questions. We need to work with the American Humanist Association and the Freedom from Religion Foundation and change, lobby for changes in the immigration process. I want to just mention briefly that you saw the picture at the beginning of me and my very good friend Mampati Shin. She came to the United States with me the same year. I didn't know her. We bumped into each other with our kids in the first apartment complex that we were both living in. She has Alzheimer's. She's worked in Houston as a nurse all her working life. She had to stop work 2 years ago because she, for health reasons, couldn't manage. And we were worried. What happens when political tides turn? And perhaps because she only has a green card, she might be sent home. And she's a lady who has such memory loss. She comes from South Africa. And we said, you know, let's do this together. So you'll see in the video that Ma'am Patty is in part of that. And I also want to say how grateful I am to all the folks who helped me on this journey. But what I was hoping was a journey that had an ending, now it has a new beginning. So Vic, if you can show the video clip, and thank you all so very, very, very much. I really appreciate the invitation to be here.
UK native known for her tireless fight against illiteracy takes on the US Immigration Service and wins. Her victory could impact others seeking citizenship who are opposed to the pledge to bear arms. Our Randy Wallace was with Doughty at her palatial home this afternoon when she learned of the government's change of heart. Randy.
Belinda, Margaret Doughty is used to being in the spotlight for the 30-plus years she spent in the U.S. as a permanent resident running nonprofit adult literacy organizations. But she didn't expect all the attention she's gotten over her application to become a naturalized citizen.
And I've been very privileged to be able to work a lot with literacy and social justice groups.
Margaret Doughty's work with the Houston Reed Commission brought her accolades and close ties to people like former President George H.W. Bush and wife Barbara. She's even been honored by Queen Elizabeth II for her achievements in education.
That was very exciting. That was in 1999, and the Queen honored me with an Order of the British Empire.
With kids and grandkids here in the U.S., Doughty decided to apply to be a naturalized citizen of the United States. But Doughty, who's a pacifist, couldn't lie to immigration officials when asked if she would pledge to bear arms in defense of the country.
It's an important moral issue for me. And she said, what grounds are you applying for a conscientious objection on? And I said, well, these are moral and ethical grounds. And she told me, well, you can really only apply on religious grounds.
Immigration told Doughty, who's an atheist, she had until Friday to join a church that's opposed to the bearing of arms. Meanwhile, Doughty's dilemma went viral, with thousands of people weighing in, most in favor of Doughty's position.
People who have very different beliefs and perspectives than mine are saying, you know, this is the right thing to do. We support you in doing this. This service hereby withdraws the request for evidence.
Fox 26 was there when Doughty got an email telling her the good news. Her application for citizenship was accepted, and immigration officials admitted a mistake was made.
And I appreciate so much all the people who have come out and supported me and written letters, and all of the different churches that offered to help. This is really wonderful. This is the power of America.
Today's victory holds a special meaning for Doughty. Now she will be able to do her oath of office next week alongside with her longtime friend from South Africa.
And as that political fight rolls on, our nation continues to welcome thousands who follow the current path to citizenship.
Last week, we met Margaret Doughty. She ran into trouble when, on moral grounds, she refused to pledge to bear arms in order to become a citizen. Fox 26 was with Doughty when she found out she had won her battle against customs and immigration. And yesterday, she joined more than 2,000 other immigrants and became a U.S. citizen.
I was just amazed and staggered by the number of people who came out to speak on my behalf, the people who wrote letters, the politicians who intervened, the press and the media who intervened, and the USCIS backed down and accepted my application, and here I am today, a proud new US citizen.
And by the way, Doughty's friend of more than 30 years also became a new citizen in yesterday's ceremony.
All right. Well, we have some time for some Q&A now. We don't have to clear out of here until 3, so please just try to keep your questions concise and topical. Thank you.
Did you have a slide of Chris's name? We'll do it after questions.
Okay. I'll get ready.
Well, what was you showed a court decision saying on moral and ethical grounds was sufficient. What was the date on that or timeline of that?
It was during the Vietnam War.
That's Vietnam.
Yeah,
So what happened when you didn't want to hold your hand up?
I put it down. Maybe I'm not an American citizen after all.
And nobody said anything.
Well, nobody saw. I mean, you're
Okay.
in this whole
Yeah, yeah,
huge area.
Yeah, right.
So as far as they're concerned, you are.
As far as, yes, good.
Who created this oath and when was it created?
I don't know. I'd have to ask my lawyer the answer to that question. I don't know when it was created. I mean, a long time ago.
The Constitution says, as you well know, that no religious test shall make the whole office. The oath should simply say, you swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States.
Well, first of all, thank you for having the courage to really, truly stand your ground. The idea of you doing that exemplifies what courage really means. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much for saying that.
I have a couple of questions. When you moved here and the America that you saw then, how do you see this America today? And the other question is, why do you think a large number of humanists are not anti-war activists or people that really get behind social justice issues?
Well, to answer the first question, I think that the change that I've seen is that I think when I first came here, the gap of the political spectrum was fairly narrow and people sort of tended towards the middle. And what I've seen over the last several years is this hugely widening gap of very, very, very diverse opinion. And I don't know where we're going from here because how do you bring those ends back to the beginning again? I was at a meeting yesterday where we were approving a new plan for literacy in Houston, and one of the pieces of language in the plan said something to do with the students with limited literacy skills are not able to fulfill their God-given potential. I wouldn't have heard that 20 years ago. It wouldn't have been written into a document. The number of meetings that I go to these days that start with a prayer. And nobody asks. Nobody, so that's what I'm seeing is when one of those news articles talked about the discrimination against folks without a religious affiliation. It's a quiet, subtle, subversive, flagrant discrimination by people who don't realize very often that there is any discrimination in what they're doing. And so our voices aren't loud enough in terms of basic human respect for others and their opinions. Your second question was?
No, the second one was about why do you think that there's not a larger number of humanists that are anti-war activists or really ones that get behind social justice issues?
I don't know for sure why that is. Part of it is that the humanist movement can embrace a very, very wide range of perspectives, which I think is a wonderful thing about it. But I think also that people who embrace a social justice issue that doesn't impact them directly can very easily say, I'll support education reform, I'll support anti-poverty activities, I'll support. But when it comes down to bearing arms, I may have a gun at home, I may, so I think that's particularly something that's ingrained more in an American psyche than in a British psyche. When I first came to this country, I'd never seen people walking around with guns. I felt physically sick, coming through the airport, physically sick, in a store where somebody standing by the door in a store was packing a gun. I'd never, ever, ever come across that. So I think that the whole gun control issue is a different issue than most social justice issues. And I don't know if that answers the question, but maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't.
What is the name of your literacy organization and how can we get involved with that?
Well, I'm going to answer that question in a different way, because the organization that I founded is called Literacy Powerline. But I retired at the beginning of this year, and I live down in Palacios. And I run, as a volunteer, I'm on the board of an organization called the Rural Literacy Coalition. And any support that anybody wants to give to that Rural Literacy Coalition would be really great. And I'm particularly saying that because in this same meeting that I talked about yesterday, where they're putting a blueprint for Houston together, this is the Barbara Bush Foundation. And in the meeting, they have defined Houston not as the greater Houston area that includes where I live right out on the edges of the empire, but it only includes school districts in the city of Houston. And therefore, so there are all sorts of literacy resources in the sort of urban heart of the community, and there are almost none in the rural areas that surround the Houston area. Yet those folks work in Houston. They are part of the greater Houston area. So if anybody wants to ask me that question afterwards, I will give you the name and the number to call. We buy books for children, new books, to make sure that every child has a new book in their home, and those books are $2 each. So anybody who wanted to make a $2 contribution would be helping a child.
I was curious to know, sorry Nancy, I was curious to know if you've established any kind of effort, looking into the immigration issue and the problems with conscientious objection and religious status, or if you had any recommendations on that front.
Right. I've talked with the folks from the Freedom from Religion Foundation and said that I don't have the legal background. I could not even answer the question about when the oath was written. So I've said to them, anything that I can do to help them in a campaign to address this, I would be very, very happy to do. So the other side of that is that I do work a lot with ESL and citizenship teachers. And that piece I can directly impact and help. I want citizenship teachers to ask their students, are you religious? Are you a conscientious objector? And then help them, if they say yes, to go through the process to make it work for them. Because they're, so many, one of the reasons that it was good that I did this was because, I got a permanent green card. I don't think that they would have sent me home. But for many of those folks who are coming in with limited literacy skills, this is a life and death issue that they need. If they're intimidated to check those boxes, it's far more important for them to be secure with their families in the United States than it is perhaps to feel that they want to make a stand on checking the box.
Two questions. One is, do you know what the British citizenship process is like? That is, if there are any required references of allegiance to the Church of England or God or anything like that? And second, do you have any sense of whether the decision in your case was just some low-level employee who wasn't aware of the law, or if it went higher up?
I'm not very familiar with the British system. I've never tried to go through it. But as far as I know, there's certainly not a pledging allegiance to the Church of England. I've never heard that. I think I would know if that was the case. And your second question?
Well, I was curious if the initial response you got, which was later reversed, was simply because of some low-level employee who was unaware of the law, or if it was, and perhaps when all the publicity started, then that person's supervisors became aware and corrected the employee, or if it was some pattern that was higher up in the office.
I had wondered that too, because I thought this must be this delightful lady. Maybe she's got a quota. Maybe she has to get 10 new citizens every day, and I don't know. But I thought, yes, perhaps she hasn't been trained very effectively. But her supervisor, and the supervisor's supervisor, and the head of USCIS in Houston all followed that same pattern. And that's why I asked the question, why? They do know that it's wrong. But what do you gain by having everybody who's in that citizenship ceremony appearing incorrectly to belong to a religion and to agree to take up arms. You know, what do you gain? It's this, there is a picture of the United States that someone, I don't know, wants to perpetuate. And we don't want to see, here are these folks who have a different perspective and the law supports them. We would rather that be not just a silent majority, but a hidden minority.
Right.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Like you, as soon as I open my mouth, everybody knows that I was not raised here. And worse than that, my initial language was not even English, like you. But I lived here many years like you with the green card. And I had very pragmatic reasons why I became a citizen. Now, what was your reason for it to be so important to become an American citizen?
Well, it was pragmatic too. I'd been thinking about it for a while. I have American grandchildren. You know, I live here, I support the country. I don't vote, but I change laws. I act like an American. So, you may not think that when you hear me, but I do. So there was that. But at the last election, when we weren't sure, what the outcome was going to be, and we listened to all of the Tea Party conversations, and we listened to conversations about immigration, I have earned my benefits as a retired person. And it occurred to me that, just the same as my friend, I might get to be 75 and 85 and 95 and 105. And I don't have any guarantee that somebody would not come to my house in the middle of the night and say, we're deporting you, we're changing the law. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, it does.
Margaret, two things. Number one, some folks around here know that I'm a nitpicker. You say...
I listened carefully.
You say literacy and poverty go hand in hand. Should that not be illiteracy and poverty go hand in hand?
It absolutely should, and you are absolutely correct, and I thank you for that correction.
The second thing is, I have had it explained to me that religious freedom means everybody is free to accept Jesus Christ as his personal Lord and Savior.
Do you still maintain your English citizenship?
I do. Yes. And I wasn't asked to turn in my English passport, so, I use both passports now, dependent on the situation that I'm in.
I was wondering, did Americans United for Separation of Church and State, or ACLU, have any of their legal people helping you on this case?
I'm hesitant to say no, but I don't recall that they did. There were a number of organizations that were not terribly helpful. The Southern Poverty Law Center was a group that I went to right off. People that I thought were going to help didn't necessarily help. And people that I was very surprised about came right out and helped. There were hands, yes.
So, in your oath, it ends with, "So help me God." Is there something that can be done about that? Because there's so many people who apply for citizenship from all over the world. There's no guarantee that they believe in that God, or a singular God, or any of those. And what about that? That, to me, that's the worst statement to put on that.
Absolutely. And what was interesting was I wasn't asked to say that in the actual citizenship interviews. It was only on the oath. So yes, absolutely. Whether all of the folks, I think, that came out to help, and so very, very many of them, if there were an organized campaign to do that, I think that could be changed. But we know that there are all these pieces of this puzzle that American Humanists Association and Freedom from Religion Foundation are really working hard to address. But if there were one thing to do and we were all to do it, we could get rid of that, yes.
Did you sign the oath?
Sorry?
Did you sign the oath in writing?
There was no requirement to sign it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I just want to, this is more of a comment, I just think you're really great. I think your story is really inspiring, and I think you're just such a good advocate for humanism and atheism. You know, what Donald was saying about why don't more humanists take up the mantle in advocacy, and I think it can be kind of touchy when you're, you know, a lot of people perceive atheists as being anti, you know, everybody else, and I feel like the way that you've gone about this was a very positive approach, and I don't think anyone can really touch it. So I think you've been a really good advocate for atheism without even trying.
Well, thank you. It's all to do with how loud your voice is, isn't it? I mean, when we were saying, you know, that this community is a silent, hidden group, it is because we are silent and hidden. It's because we are not speaking loud enough together as a group to make change. And I think part of that is that there are so many issues. You know, you're perhaps working on a piece, you're perhaps working on a piece, you're working on a piece, you're working on a piece. But to do exactly what you said and say, this piece, let's address this piece and make the change in this piece. And take it one bite at a time.
Wikipedia says that so help me God, dates back from the British oath, dates back to the 16th century.
Goodness. Thank you.
Louis, you and I are not that old. We don't remember that.
Well, this is also just a comment. You know, earlier you mentioned, you know, why don't we speak up? I look at it as a form of bullying. It's like being in high school all over again because your school of thoughts is a bit different than the others, and it's just better to just stay quiet, have to the back of the class, and not speak up because you'll be shunned for it. And then it's 20 people against one. So why even put yourself in that risk situation when you yourself, and I'm talking about myself, don't even speak that loud to begin with? So I'm just coming from a very structured upbringing in religion and just kind of knowing the background of a lot of different religions as well. It's just, I find it better not to speak up unless I'm in a crowd where I feel safe. So,
yeah. Takes courage.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
Did you feel that the preponderance of people who came out supporting you were either nuns or closet nuns? It's a really subjective question.
I'll tell you, the person who came out to support me that surprised me the most was a Vietnam War veteran. And he said, I fought in Vietnam for everybody in the United States, not just the people who believe what I believe.
You go to Vietnam, and that brings up war, and that brings us back to this ethical, moral dilemmas that come up. I'm going to put you in a hypothetical. You're in Zimbabwe. There's a new Hitler running around there, and your grandchild is threatened. Can you kill him?
No.
Even if your grandchildren is going down?
I can do everything in my power to prevent that from happening without killing that person.
And if your power is limited and your grandchild is going to die, you can't kill still.
I don't believe that we have the right to take that.
Okay. Now, I mean, I'm different, but largely. Because I had an uncle during World War II, and this country was on a war footing, and he was a CEO. You know, where this guy came from, I still don't know. I didn't get a chance ever to talk to him. I disagreed with him. I think Hitler had to be opposed by force. Well, there is another issue, though, that comes up. How about force? Non-lethal, you know, force all the way up to the point of being killed. How about that?
Well, first of all, just to go back to the first
Yes.
comment,
Yes.
I can't take a life, but I can give my life. So in that situation, you know, I can protect my grandchild and lose my life.
Well, the outcome of that.
Maybe the both of us do, but
Yeah,
just,
right. No,
just to make
that's,
that point.
yeah, that's the. I've just been wrestling with this for years. Because I'm against capital punishment. I'm against generally taking life. I was in Zimbabwe, and I, for a long time, did not have a weapon. But at one point, something came, and I did the some animals are more equal than other animals thing, and I voted to vote. And it wasn't a bluff.
And I also lived in Zimbabwe.
Oh, did you know?
So.
During Mugabe's time, or?
No, at the end of Ian Smith. So I did.
We need to talk, because that's
All
what I
right,
was there.
okay. I did my, again, one of the questions that they asked me in this process was, would I serve my country? And I said, I have. I did volunteer service overseas, which is the same as the Peace Corps. And, you know, again, I would plug for that, because doing that international Peace Corps type of service helps people sort of work together and really, you know, I'm going to say something that maybe I'll regret. Patriotism is a problem too. You know, I believe that we're all citizens of this world. And so, you know, once you're right and somebody else is wrong, that, you know, it's where does the conflict start? And so, you know, in that situation, I don't know what would have happened. I haven't been in it. I would have had a great big sign on the wall that says no guns here. It wouldn't have been enough, you know? So you're right down to the last minute. You don't truly know, and I don't want to stand up here and look, you know, my mother was a soldier in the Second World War, and she fought against Hitler, and for her that was absolutely the most important thing she did in her entire life. So I think it's a very difficult question, because it comes down to absolutely what will you do at that very minute. But that's what I've expressed is what I believe and what I hope I will be able to do.
Yeah, no, I put you on the spot,
Yeah,
and I
that's
know
okay.
it, and I appreciate it.
Some of your responses put me in mind of the following question. You know, very recently, a priest, a pastor, Mike House in Houston, has announced that his congregation that he's now working with are a humanist congregational freethinkers. And I asked him a question at a meeting, not really knowing what answer I expected to hear about morality. And his comment was something along the lines that he thought that most of the Christian churches are okay on morality, they pass on morality. That's not a problem. I have been thinking about this, and I must admit I had not really thought about it deeply before, but I think the problem is morality. That most of the teaching of morality is de facto left to the churches, and they spin a whole story which is immoral from the beginning. And our responsibility, perhaps as humanists or atheists or freethinkers, is to teach morality properly. And it's not an easy subject to teach, of course, but I think that's our primary responsibility. So I don't know what you think about that.
Well, it's a very interesting conversation, because if you're standing here with a Bible in your hand, you're teaching what you know to be true. And if you're standing over here as a humanist, you're also teaching what you know to be true. And I think teaching, perhaps, is the challenging word. It's presenting all of the options to every individual so that everybody can make a really good, informed decision themselves, so that none of us tell anybody else what it is that they need to do. Does that?
That's a good answer, I think.
It's great talking to you guys. Thank you so much. This book, this is a plug, it's an advertisement. If you want to close your ears, because I'm advertising too. I'm also advertising my stepson, so that makes it even doubly a challenge. But, oh my goodness, This young man has been around the United States. He has videoed and interviewed 100 atheists. And his book comes out this week. It's called A Better Life. 100 atheists speak out on joy and meaning in a world without God. So if you see this, there's the www.theatheistbook.com. He would be very grateful if you wanted to have a look at it. He's a struggling young videographer. And I just wanted to take the opportunity, and I asked Vic if it was okay to do advertising. And he said, yes, they might be interested in that book. So thank you.